The most powerful startup in the world did not begin like a normal startup. It did not begin with a pitch deck promising faster food delivery. It did not begin with a social app. It did not begin with a founder saying, "We are going to disrupt an industry." It began with a small group of people in Silicon Valley looked at artificial intelligence and saw the future. In one future, AI could help cure diseases, tutor children, write code, discover new science, make people more productive, and turn knowledge into something almost anyone could use. In the other future, I could concentrate power in the hands of a few companies and automate manipulation, destabilize labor markets, produce dangerous tools, and eventually create systems no one could fully control. That was the tension from the beginning. OpenAI was not born as a normal company trying to win a market. It was born as a warning. In RDO, OpenAI introduced itself as a nonprofit artificial intelligence research company. Its stated goal was to advance digital intelligence in a way that would benefit humanity as a whole, without being driven by the need to generate financial returns. That mission sounded almost anti-business. No normal venture capitalist who's unconstrained by financial return and thinks, "Great, this will become one of the most valuable companies on earth." But that is exactly what makes the story so strange. OpenAI started as a nonprofit trying to prevent AI from being controlled by a few powerful actors. A decade later, it had become one of the most powerful actors in AI. That is not just irony. That is the whole story. Because OpenAI's rise is really the story of a company trying to balance three forces that do not naturally fit together: mission, money, power. The mission said, "Build artificial general intelligence for the benefit of humanity." The money said, "You need billions of dollars in compute, talent, chips, infrastructure, and distribution." The power said, "If you actually build useful AI before everyone else, the world will rearrange around you." OpenAI did not become powerful because it had the first chatbot. It became powerful because it turned artificial intelligence from a research race into a consumer product, a developer platform, an enterprise tool, a government concern, a Wall Street obsession, and a geopolitical issue. Before ChatGPT, AI was important. After ChatGPT, I became unavoidable. That is the difference. For years, I had lived mostly inside labs, recommendation systems, search engines, ad platforms, translation tools, facial recognition systems, and enterprise software. People used AI every day without thinking about it. Then ChatGPT arrived, and suddenly people could talk to the machine. That changed everything. The product was simple. A box, a conversation, a reply. But the effect was enormous. For the first time, millions of ordinary people could feel that modern AI could do. It could explain. It could write. It could code. It could summarize. It could brainstorm. It could role play. It could answer follow-up questions. It could make mistakes with confidence. It could feel useful. Strange, funny, dangerous, and magical all at once. That was OpenAI's great, not only building the model, packaging the model into an experience that normal people understood instantly. A research paper can change a field. A product can change the world. ChatGPT was the product. And from that moment, OpenAI stopped being just a lab. It became the company everyone had to respond to. Google had to respond. Microsoft had to respond. Meta had to respond. Amazon had to respond. Apple had to respond. NVIDIA became even more central. Startups changed their pitch decks overnight. Universities changed their policies. Schools panicked. Writers protested. Programmers experimented. Lawyers debated. Governments held hearings. Investors opened their wallets. Executives asked their teams, "What is our IT strategy?" That is power. Power is not only money. Power is making everyone else move. OpenAI made the world move. But to understand how it got there, we have to go back to the beginning. The original OpenAI had a very different mood from the OpenAI people know today. It was announced with big names, big ideals, and big uncertainty. Sam Altman, then known for Y Combinator and his role in the startup world, was one of the co-chairs. Elon Musk was another early co-chair and backer. Greg Brockman, formerly CTO of Stripe, became one of the key technical and organizational leaders. Ilya Sutskever, one of the most respected machine learning researchers in the world, became research director. Other founding members included serious researchers and engineers, not celebrity founders trying to build a quick app. The pitch was bold. I might one day become as important as electricity, the computer, or the internet. If that happened, the people building it would have enormous power. So OpenAI, I would try to build advanced AI in a way that was safer, more open, and more broadly beneficial. At the time, this still sounded like a long-term research project. I was impressive, but it was not yet something most people thought about every morning. Deep learning had already made major progress in image recognition, speech recognition, translation, and game playing. But artificial general intelligence still sounded distant. OpenAI started with research projects that were interesting but not world-changing to the average person. Reinforcement learning, game environments, robotics, language models, safety work, benchmarks, papers, code releases. In those early years, OpenAI was part lab, part ideology, part bet. It attracted people who believed AI might become the most important technology in history. But belief does not pay for chips. That became the first major problem. Modern AI needs enormous amounts of compute, not just clever ideas, not just smart researchers. Compute, servers, GPS, networking, cloud infrastructure, power, money. In Arding the nonprofit model sounded noble. By Arding it looked too small for the ambition. OpenAI realized that if it wanted to compete with Google, DeepMind, Facebook, and other giants, it needed the ability to raise serious capital and pay top talent. A nonprofit could not easily match the equity packages and resources of big tech. It could not easily finance the scale of compute required for Contour AI. It could not move like a startup and spend like a cloud company at the same time. So OpenAI made its first controversial transformation. In Arding it created OpenAI LP, a kept profit company controlled by the nonprofit. This was one of the most important decisions in the company's history. The idea was to raise capital while keeping the mission in control. Investors and employees could earn returns, but those returns would be capped. The nonprofit would remain the ultimate authority. The mission would come first. That was the theory. In plain English, OpenAI was saying, we cannot build the future with donations alone. We need startup money, but we do not want to become a normal company. This structure was unusual, complicated, and easy to criticize. Supporters said it was a practical compromise. Critics said it was the beginning of OpenAI drifting away from its original promise. Both were partly right. The capped profit structure gave OpenAI a way to raise money and attract talent. It also pulled OpenAI deeper into the world of investors, cloud deals, and commercial pressure. Once a company needs billions, money becomes part of the mission, whether people admit it or not. That same year, Microsoft entered the story in a serious way. Microsoft invested $1 billion in OpenAI and Arding and became its critical cloud partner. This was not just a financial deal. It was an infrastructure deal. OpenAI needed compute. Microsoft needed a stronger AI story for Azure and its future products. Both companies needed each other. At the time, Microsoft was powerful but not seen as the hottest AI company. Google had DeepMind and years of AI research prestige. Meta had massive AI talent. Amazon had AWS. Apple had devices. NVIDIA had chips. Microsoft had enterprise distribution, cloud ambition, and a CEO who understood platform shifts. The OpenAI partnership gave Microsoft something it could not easily build quickly by itself, a front row seat to the most exciting AI all outside the big tech giant. For OpenAI, Microsoft gave access to the cloud muscle needed to train bigger models. This partnership became one of the most important alliances in modern technology. But like all powerful alliances, it came with tension. OpenAI wanted independence. Microsoft wanted access. OpenAI needed compute. Microsoft owned the cloud. OpenAI had the model brand. Microsoft had the customers. OpenAI had the future. Microsoft had the distribution. The partnership was a marriage of ambition and necessity, and it would eventually become both OpenAI's biggest advantage and one of its biggest sources of pressure. Then came GPT-3. In Arling, OpenAI released GPT-3, a language model that shocked people who were paying attention. It could generate text in ways that felt far more flexible than earlier systems. It could write essays, answer questions, create code-like output, summarize, translate, and imitate styles. It was not perfect. It made things up. It could be strange, biased, or wrong, but it showed something important. Scale work. Bigger models trained on more data with more compute could produce surprising new abilities. This became one of the central beliefs of OpenAI's rise. Scale was not just an engineering choice. Scale was a worldview. If you made the models bigger, trained them longer, used more compute, and improved the feedback system, the model would become more capable in ways even researchers did not always predict. This belief changed the business. Because if scale worked, then the winners would need enormous resources, not just talent, not just data. Compute. OpenAI's artificial decision suddenly looked less like a compromise and more like the only path. If the future belonged to skilled AI, then the company that could raise money by compute, hire researchers, and deploy products fastest would have a huge advantage. GPT-3 also marked another important shift. OpenAI began selling access through an API. That sounds simple. It was not. An API turned a model into a platform. Developers did not need to train their own giant AI system. They could rent intelligence from OpenAI. This changed the economic shape of AI. Before, I was mostly a research capability or a tool embedded inside giant companies. Now, startups and developers could build products on top of a frontier model. That made OpenAI more than a lab. It became a supplier. A new kind of supplier. Not supplying servers, not supplying software in the usual way. Supplying language intelligence. This was the start of the AI platform, but GPT-3 was still mostly used by developers, researchers, and curious tech. It was impressive, but it had not yet taken over the culture. The next step was alignment. That word can sound technical, but the idea is simple. How do you make the model behave in ways humans actually want? A raw language model predicts text. It does not automatically know how to be helpful. It does not automatically know how to refuse dangerous requests. It does not automatically know how to admit uncertainty. It does not automatically understand what kind of answer a user wants. OpenAI worked on instruction following and reinforcement learning from human feedback. Human trainers compared answers. Models were fine-tuned to follow instructions. Systems became better at responding like assistants. This work mattered because the product that changed the world was not just a language model. It was a language model shaped into a helpful conversational interface. That shaping is why ChatGPT felt different. It was not just completing your sentence. It was trying to help. That sounds small. It is huge. A model that completes text is a tool for experts. A model that helps in conversation is a product for everyone. On November 2nd, OpenAI introduced ChatGPT as a research preview. The company did not launch it like a giant consumer platform. It was free to use during the preview. OpenAI said it wanted feedback on the system's strengths and weaknesses. It warned about limitations. It said the model could produce plausible sounding but incorrect answers. It said the system could be sensitive to phrasing. It said it could sometimes be verbose. It said it might refuse some requests incorrectly or respond to harmful ones. In other words, OpenAI knew it was imperfect, but the public did not care that it was imperfect. People cared that it worked well enough to feel new. Within days, ChatGPT spread everywhere. People posted screenshots. Students used it. Developers used it for code. Workers used it for emails. Founders used it to brainstorm products. Teachers worried. Journalists experimented. Twitter turned into a live demo reel. Executives asked assistants to try it. Teenagers used it for homework. Lawyers tested it. Doctors tested it. Writers argued about it. Artists worried about what came next. The product had almost no learning curve. You did not need to understand machine learning. You did not need to install software. You did not need to write code. You just typed. That was the math. It made advanced AI feel like a website. This is why ChatGPT became a platform moment. The technology becomes powerful when ordinary people can use it without understanding the infrastructure behind it. The car did not require drivers to understand engines. The iPhone did not require users to understand wireless networks. Google did not require users to understand web indexing. ChatGPT did not require users to understand transformers, tokens, or LHF, or Azure supercomputers. They gave the public a box, and the box answered. That simple experience detonated the AI boom. Suddenly, OpenAI had something no AI lab had ever had at this scale, a direct relationship with mass consumer attention. That is rare. DeepMind had prestige. Google had infrastructure. Meta had distribution. Amazon had cloud. Microsoft had enterprise software. OpenAI had the cultural moment. That moment turned into power very quickly. In January Microsoft announced the next phase of its partnership with OpenAI, a multi-year, multi-billion-dollar investment. Microsoft moved fast. It began putting OpenAI technology into Bing, Office, GitHub, Azure, and enterprise products. The word Copilot became Microsoft's way of selling AI as a helper inside work. For Microsoft, OpenAI was not just an investment. It was a chance to attack Google Search, revive Bing, strengthen Azure, defend Office, and lead the enterprise AI wave. OpenAI gave Microsoft the story. Microsoft gave OpenAI the scale. This was when the rest of big tech realized the game had changed. Google, which had spent years as one of the world's top AI research organizations, suddenly looked like it had been caught off guard. That was one of the strangest things about the ChatGPT moment. Google had the talent. Google had the papers. Google had the infrastructure. Google had invented or helped pioneer many of the ideas behind modern AI. But OpenAI had the product that captured the public. In technology, being first in research is not the same as being first in market imagination. OpenAI won the imagination. Google rushed to respond. Microsoft looked aggressive. Meta pushed open models. Anthropic became a major rival. Cohere, Mistral, XAI, Perplexity, and dozens of others became part of the broader AI race. NVIDIA became the supplier everyone needed. Venture capital poured into anything with a credible AI story. OpenAI had become the center of the storm. And this is the moment when the company started to feel less like a startup and more like a systemically important institution. Governments wanted to talk to it. Enterprises wanted contracts. Developers wanted access. Consumers wanted subscriptions. Investors wanted shares. Competitors wanted talent. Publishers wanted answers about training data. Artists wanted protection. Safety researchers wanted caution. Regulators wanted rules. Employees wanted clarity. Microsoft wanted partnership stability. The board wanted mission control. All of these forces pressed on OpenAI at the same time. That is what power feels like from the inside, not pressure. OpenAI had to move fast, raise money, improve models, manage safety, satisfy customers, keep Microsoft close, avoid becoming a Microsoft subsidiary, defend its mission, deal with lawsuits, expand infrastructure, and keep the public excited. No normal startup has to do all of that at once. Most startups fight for attention. OpenAI had too much attention. Most startups fight to find product market. OpenAI found world market. Most startups struggle to convince people their market exists. OpenAI made every company ask whether its market was about to be changed. That is why it became so powerful so quickly. But power also made the contradictions harder to hide. The biggest contradiction was this: OpenAI's mission said it was building AGI for everyone. Its business required enormous private capital. Its product and global influence. Its governance still came from a non-profit board designed for a different era. That tension exploded in November on November 16, OpenAI's board removed Sam Altman as CEO. The announcement shocked the technology world. The board said it no longer had confidence in Altman's ability to continue leading OpenAI and said he had not been consistently candid in communications with the board. To the outside world, it looked like a corporate earthquake. The face of the AI boom had been fired by the company he led. The company behind ChatGPT suddenly looked unstable. Microsoft investors, employees, customers, and the entire AI industry were left trying to understand what had happened. Then things got even stranger. Greg Brockman resigned. Employees revolted. Investors pushed for Altman's return. Microsoft offered a landing place. OpenAI employees threatened leave. Social media turned into a live power struggle. The board's authority looked strong for a moment, then fragile. Within days, Altman was back. OpenAI announced an agreement for him to return as CEO with a new initial board. The attempted removal had failed. But the crisis revealed something deeper. OpenAI was no longer just a mission-driven lab. It had become too important for a small board to control without the rest of the ecosystem. Employees had power. Microsoft had power. Investors had power. Customers had power. Public attention had power. Sam Altman had power as the person most associated with the company's rise. The nonprofit board could technically fire the CEO. But in practice, the company had become embedded in a much larger network. That was the lesson. OpenAI's governance structure had been built to prevent uncontrolled commercial pressure. Once the company became central to the AI economy, commercial reality pushed back. The November crisis was not just office drama. It was a constitutional crisis for the most important AI startup in the world. Who actually controlled OpenAI? The board. The mission? The CEO? The employees? Microsoft? The investors? The users? The future value of the company? The answer was not simple. That is why the crisis fascinated everyone. It showed that OpenAI's power had outgrown its structure. After the crisis, OpenAI tried to stabilize. A review was completed in Arsun, and the board expressed confidence in Altman and Brockman's leadership. New board members joined. Governance changed. The company kept growing. But the trust question did not disappear. Some safety researchers and former employees worried that OpenAI had become too commercial. Some critics argued that the company was racing ahead too quickly. Some supporters argued that deployment was necessary to learn, improve, and make AI useful. Some believed OpenAI was the best hope for safe AGI. Others feared it had become exactly the kind of concentrated AI power it originally warned about. This is the central drama of OpenAI. It is both the company that made AI accessible and the company that made AI feel dangerous. It gave millions of people useful tools. It also accelerated a race that many people did not. It talks about broad benefit. It also raises huge amounts of money and signs giant infrastructure. It says safety matters. It also moves with startup speed in a field where mistakes could be serious. It is not easy to put OpenAI into one moral category. That is why the story is compelling. OpenAI is not simply a hero. It is not simply a villain. It is a powerful institution trying to build a technology that may be bigger than the institution itself. And like every powerful institution, it is shaped by incentive. The incentive to build better models. The incentive to grow revenue. The incentive to keep users. The incentive to be competitors. The incentive to secure compute. The incentive to satisfy partners. The incentive to look responsible. The incentive to define regulation before regulation defines it. The incentive to become the default AI layer for work and life. Those incentives are enormous. OpenAI's business model evolved quickly after ChatGPT. First came consumer subscriptions. ChatGPT Plus proved that people would pay for better AI access. That was important because it showed AI could be a direct consumer business, not only an enterprise or advertising product. Then came the API platform. Developers could build on OpenAI models. Startups could use OpenAI as their intelligence layer. This made OpenAI a platform provider. Then came enterprise. ChatGPT Enterprise, business offerings, and model access for companies made OpenAI part of workplace transformation. Enterprises wanted secure AI tools, better productivity, custom use cases, and access to frontier models. Then came partnerships. Microsoft integrated OpenAI models into its products. Other companies built OpenAI into workflows. Government and education deals expanded the company's reach. Then came infrastructure expansion. OpenAI needed more compute than one partnership could comfortably provide forever. It explored huge infrastructure projects, chip partnerships, and data center plans. This is how OpenAI became powerful across multiple layers. Consumer interface, developer platform, enterprise tool, model provider, infrastructure buyer, policy actor, cultural symbol. Most startups are lucky to own one layer. OpenAI touched all of them. That is why calling it a startup almost feels strange. A startup usually has to ask permission from platforms. OpenAI became a platform. A startup usually depends on a market. OpenAI helped create a market. A startup usually tries to get media attention. OpenAI became a global policy issue. A startup usually raises money to survive. OpenAI raised money to build infrastructure on a scale that looked more like national industrial policy. This is what makes the company so unusual. By Arting Arwu, OpenAI's structure had changed again. The nonprofit remained central, but the for-profit side became OpenAI Group PBC, a public benefit corporation under the updated structure. Microsoft held a major stake in the restructured entity. OpenAI gained more ability to raise capital and pursue the massive compute build-out required for frontier AI. This was another step away from the original simple nonprofit identity. The company framed it as a way to align mission and commercial success while scaling resources. Critics saw it as another sign that the mission had been forced to bend around capital. Again, both sides had a point. If OpenAI wants to build frontier AI, it needs immense resources. If it takes immense resources, it enters the logic of markets. If it enters the logic of markets, it must manage incentives that do not always align with benefit humanity. That is not a slogan problem. It is a structural problem. The more powerful AI becomes, the more expensive it becomes. The more expensive it becomes, the more capital is needed. The more capital is needed, the more commercial pressure grows. The more commercial pressure grows, the harder it becomes to keep pure mission control. OpenAI's entire history is the attempt to solve that equation. Maybe no one can solve it perfectly, but OpenAI keeps trying because the stakes are too high to stop. Now let us talk about the real source of OpenAI's power, the default position in people's minds. When many people think of AI, they think of ChatGPT. That is priceless. Google became a verb because it owned search. Zoom became a verb because it owned video meetings during the remote work shift. Photoshop became a verb because it owned image editing. ChatGPT became the symbol of generative AI. This kind of brand position is hard to buy. It comes from timing, product, and cultural shock. OpenAI launched ChatGPT at exactly the moment when the models were good enough to impress normal people, but still strange enough to feel miraculous. If it had launched too early, the product might have looked like a toy. If it had launched too late, Google, Microsoft, Meta, or another company might have captured the public's imagination first. Timing mattered. The product did not need to be perfect. It needed to be good enough to make people imagine the next version. That is what happened. People did not only use ChatGPT for what it could do that day. They used it to imagine what it might do next. That future imagination created investment, fear, and urgency. OpenAI became powerful because it owned the narrative of the future. The company did not have to claim that every job would change. Users made the connection themselves. They saw the tool write an email and imagine marketing changing. They saw it write code and imagine software engineering changing. They saw it summarize documents and imagine law changing. They saw it answer questions and imagined education changing. They saw it reason through tasks and imagine consulting changing. They saw it generate images, voices, and video and imagine media changing. OpenAI did not just sell software. It sold a glimpse. That glimpse was enough to move markets. This is the kind of power startups dream about. But it also creates unrealistic expectation. Once people believe you are building the future, every update is judged against the future. Every model release becomes a referendum. Every outage becomes a sign of strain. Every mistake becomes a safety debate. Every competitor becomes a threat. Every delay becomes a narrative problem. OpenAI now has to perform under mythological pressure. That is hard. The company has rivals on every side. Google wants to protect search, Android, cloud, workspace, and its AI leadership. Anthropic wants to be the trusted, safety-focused enterprise AI company. Meta wants open models to pressure closed model economics. XAI wants speed, personality, and deep integration with the Musk ecosystem. Mistral wants European AI strength and open weight models. Perplexity wants to own AI search. Microsoft is partner and sometimes competitor. Amazon and Google sell cloud and models. Apple controls devices. NVIDIA controls critical hardware. OpenAI may be powerful, but it is not alone. The AI market is not a straight road. It is a knife fight across layers. Models, apps, cloud, chips, data, agents, search, enterprise software, consumer subscriptions, regulation, talent, energy, distribution. OpenAI is fighting in many of these at the same time. That is both strength and risk. Strength because the company can shape the whole ecosystem. Risk because it can be attacked from every direction. If models become commodities, OpenAI's model advantage weakens. If open source models catch up, pricing pressure increases. If Google or Anthropic beats it in enterprise trust, customers may shift. If Microsoft builds more independent AI options, partnership leverage changes. If compute costs remain high, margins are pressured. If regulation becomes strict, deployment slows. If safety failures occur, trust suffers. If users get tired of subscription, consumer revenue slows. If agents fail to deliver, enterprise expectations cool. OpenAI's position is powerful, not guaranteed. That is what makes the company interesting. It is both dominant and vulnerable. It has the brand, the users, the talent, the capital, and the partnerships. But it also has huge costs, intense scrutiny, powerful rivals, and a mission that creates moral pressure. Now let us talk about some Altman. It is impossible to tell OpenAI's story without him. Altman is not the only person who built OpenAI. That would be false. OpenAI's rise involved researchers, engineers, product teams, safety teams, policy people, infrastructure teams, and co-founders like Greg Brockman and Dilia Tsk. But Altman became the public face and deal maker. He understood startups. He understood fundraising. He understood narratives. He understood the importance of turning technology into a movement. He became the person governance called, journalists profiled. That kind of role is powerful but dangerous. When one person becomes the symbol of a company building world-changing technology, every governance question becomes personal. Supporters see leadership. Critics see concentration. Employees see vision or pressure, depending on where they stand. Partners see someone who can get deals done. Boards see both. The RDR-Sen firing showed how central Altman had become. If a normal CEO is removed, the company might continue. When Altman was removed, OpenAI almost broke open. That tells you something. The company's power had become attached to his leadership in a way that made governance extremely difficult. OpenAI, after RDR-Sen, had to mature from founder-lead chaos into institutional power. That is a hard transition for any startup. It is much harder when the startup might define the future of AI. Now let us talk about Greg Brockman. Brockman was one of the builders behind the scenes. He left Stripe and helped turn OpenAI from an idea into an organization. He played a central role in engineering culture, execution, and product delivery. When the RDR-Sen crisis happened, his resignation after Altman's removal became a major signal. When he returned, It helps stabilize the company. Bachman's role matters because OpenAI's power is not only narrative, it is execution. The company has to ship, train models, run infrastructure, serve users, improve reliability, build products, support developers, handle enterprise customers, manage safety systems. Vision gets attention. Execution creates power. OpenAI became powerful because it shipped at the right time. Now let us talk about Tilya Sutiesk Ever. Sutiesk Ever represented the research soul of OpenAI in many people's minds. He was one of the world's leading AI researchers and one of the company's original scientific anchors. His role in the RDR board crisis, followed by his later departure, became part of the broader narrative of tension between safety, research, governance, and commercialization. His story shows that OpenAI's rise was not a simple business victory. It was also a story of internal conflict among people who all took AI seriously but disagreed about how to handle power. That is important. The people inside OpenAI were not debating a normal product roadmap. They were debating how fast to build systems that might change society. Disagreements were inevitable. Now let us talk about Microsoft again, because Microsoft may be the most important external character in the OpenAI story. Microsoft did not just invest money. It gave OpenAI the industrial backbone. Azure supercomputing infrastructure helped train and serve OpenAI systems. Microsoft's capital and cloud capacity made scaling possible. Microsoft's enterprise distribution turned OpenAI technology into workplace products. Microsoft's partnership gave OpenAI credibility with large companies. But Microsoft also benefited enormously. The partnership helped Microsoft appear as the leading AI giant almost overnight. It gave Bing a new story. It gave Office a new growth narrative. It strengthened Azure's position in the AI cloud war. It helped Microsoft become the company most closely associated with commercial deployment after the ChatGPT boom. This is why the partnership was so valuable. OpenAI had the breakthrough product. Microsoft had the distribution and infrastructure. Together, they changed the market. But the partnership also created strategic tension. OpenAI did not want to be dependent on one cloud forever. Microsoft did not want to lose influence over the company it helped scale. OpenAI needed more compute than any one relationship could easily provide. Microsoft wanted returns on its investment and access to the technology. OpenAI wanted freedom to partner elsewhere, build hardware plans, and raise capital. This is why the relationship evolved over time. By adding R-Lil, OpenAI was exploring and announcing massive infrastructure relationships beyond the original Microsoft arrangement, including projects with NVIDIA, AMD, Broadcom, Oracle-related infrastructure, and Stargate. The message was clear. OpenAI no longer wanted to be only a model company renting capacity. It wanted to shape the infrastructure layer too. That is a major shift. If OpenAI wants to be the most powerful AI company in the world, it cannot only build models. It needs compute. It needs chips. It needs data centers. It needs energy. It needs partnerships. It needs control over the supply chain of intelligence. This is why OpenAI's ambition started to look more like an industrial empire than a software startup. The company that began as a nonprofit research lab now talks about gigawatts of AI infrastructure. That sentence alone tells the story. OpenAI became powerful because AI stopped being just code. It became infrastructure. The model needs a factory. OpenAI wants access to the factory, influence over the factory, and eventually maybe more control of the factory. That is why Stargate and chip partnerships matter. They are not side projects. They are OpenAI trying to solve the bottleneck that could limit its future. The smartest model does not matter if you cannot run it at scale. ChatGPT gave OpenAI users. Enterprise gave it revenue. API gave it platform reach. Infrastructure gives it survival. Now let us talk about revenue. OpenAI's business grew at a speed that looked almost unreal compared with traditional enterprise software. Consumer subscriptions brought in direct money from users. API usage brought in developer revenue. Enterprise deals brought in higher value contracts. Microsoft-related products expanded usage through partner distribution. Future advertising, commerce, and agent models became possible. This matters because power in technology comes from combining adoption and monetization. A product with users but no revenue can be fragile. A product with revenue but no cultural relevance can be limited. OpenAI had both. People used it. Businesses paid for it. Developers built with it. Investors valued it. Partners needed it. That combination made OpenAI one of the most valuable private companies in the world. But revenue came with costs. AI is expensive to run. Every user message costs compute. Every image costs compute. Every code suggestion costs compute. Every enterprise deployment costs compute. Every model training run costs enormous money. Every new feature can increase infrastructure demand. OpenAI's business model is not like a simple SaaS app where extra users are almost free. The AI has real marginal costs. That is why infrastructure matters so much. OpenAI has to turn expensive intelligence into profitable products. That is not easy. If prices are too high, users leave. If prices are too low, margins suffer. If models are too expensive, enterprise adoption slows. If competitors undercut, pricing pressure grows. If open source models get good enough, customers may question why they pay premium prices. If consumer usage grows faster than revenue, costs balloon. OpenAI's power depends on solving the economics of intelligence. That is the hidden business challenge. The company must make AI better while making AI cheaper. Better models attract users. Cheaper inference makes the business work. This is why OpenAI invests in infrastructure. Model efficiency, partnerships, and product design. Not just because it wants to be technically impressive, because the economics demand it. Now let us talk about the enterprise market. Consumers made ChatGPT famous. Enterprises may make OpenAI durable. A consumer can cancel a subscription. A company can sign a large contract, integrate AI into workflows, train employees, connect data, and become dependent. That is why enterprise AI is so valuable. OpenAI wants to be inside the workplace, not only as a chatbot tab, as a layer for writing, coding, research, customer support, data analysis, meeting summaries, workflow automation, and eventually agents. If OpenAI becomes the AI layer inside companies, its power deepens. But enterprise customers are demanding. They care about security, privacy, compliance, reliability, cost, integration, governance, support, audit logs, data for residency, model performance, risk management. A viral consumer product does not automatically become an enterprise platform. OpenAI has had to mature quickly. This is another reason Microsoft was so important. Microsoft already knew enterprise sales. It already had trusted relationships. It already had compliance infrastructure. OpenAI could ride part of that distribution while building its own business. But OpenAI also wants direct enterprise relationships. That gives it independence and higher strategic. This is where the partner-competitor tension with Microsoft becomes unavoidable. Microsoft sells Copilot. OpenAI sells ChatGPT Enterprise and API access. Sometimes they complement each other. Sometimes they overlap. This is normal in platform partnerships. It is also messy. Now let us talk about developers. OpenAI's API created a generation of AI startups. Some were serious. Some were thin wrappers. Some became real products. Some disappeared. Some built entire companies on OpenAI's models. Some later moved to open source alternatives or multiple providers. The API gave OpenAI reach beyond its own apps. Every developer building with OpenAI extended the company's influence. But developer platforms are fragile. Developers worry about pricing, rate limits, model changes, reliability, vendor lock-in, competition from the platform itself, data privacy, future terms. If a startup builds on OpenAI and OpenAI later launches a similar feature, the startup may feel threatened. If OpenAI changes prices, startup margins change. If OpenAI's model behavior changes, products may break. This is the platform problem. OpenAI wants developers to build on it. Developers want OpenAI's power without being swallowed by it. That tension will continue. Now let us talk about safety and regulation. OpenAI has always talked about safety. Its mission is built around AGI benefiting humanity. It published a charter. It built safety teams. It engaged with governments. Sam Altman testified before lawmakers and called for AI regulation. The company developed policies, safeguards, and evaluation systems. But critics asked, can a company racing to lead the market regulate itself? Can a company that needs revenue slow down when safety requires it? Can a company with billions at stake be trusted to define the rules? Can a nonprofit-controlled structure really resist commercial pressure? Can deployment at massive scale be safe enough? These questions do not have easy answers. OpenAI's supporters argue that building and deploying AI carefully is the best way to learn and make systems safer. They argue that hiding powerful AI in closed labs would not solve the problem. They argue that OpenAI has done more than most companies to bring safety into public conversation. Critics argue that OpenAI's actions have accelerated a race, increased dependency on private AI systems, and shifted from openness toward closed, commercial models. Again, both sides see something real. OpenAI did make AI more useful and visible. It also accelerated competition. OpenAI did promote safety. It also moved fast. OpenAI did begin with broad benefit language. It also became a private company with huge valuation and powerful partners. This is why OpenAI creates such strong reaction. It sits at the intersection of hope and suspicion. People want the tools. They fear the power behind them. Now let us talk about copyright and content. Training AI models requires data. A lot of data. OpenAI's models learned patterns from huge text and media datasets. Publishers, authors, artists, news organizations, and rights holders began asking hard questions. Was their work used? Was permission needed? Should they be paid? Is training fair use? Does the output compete with the original creators? Can a model summarize or imitate content in ways that reduce traffic or value? OpenAI has faced lawsuits and public criticism over these issues. It has also signed content partnerships with some publishers. This is one of the biggest legal challenges in AI. AI companies need data. Creators want control and compensation. Users want answers. Publishers want traffic. Courts and regulators are still sorting out the rules. OpenAI is at the center because it is the most famous AI company. If OpenAI wins legal arguments, the AI industry gains room to train and deploy more freely. If it loses major cases, the economics of AI training and output could change. This makes OpenAI powerful in another way. Its legal battles may shape the rules for everyone. Now let us talk about product expansion. OpenAI did not stop at ChatGPT. It pushed into images with DALL-E, code with codecs and coding tools, voice interactions, enterprise offerings, custom GPTs, assistants and agent-like workflow, video generation with Sora, search-like experiences, developer tools, education and government partnerships. Each new product expands the idea of what OpenAI is. Not just a chatbot company, not just a model lab, a general AI product company. That ambition is necessary because the market is moving fast. If OpenAI only stays as a model API, it risks being commoditized. If it only stays as a chatbot, it risks being copied. If it only sells to consumers, enterprise competitors may dominate. If it only sells to enterprises, consumer min share may shift. So OpenAI expands, but expansion creates complexity. Every new product is competitors. Every new product has safety risks. Every new product consumes compute. Every new product creates expectation. Every new product may upset partners or developers. A platform company must decide where to compete and where to enable others. OpenAI is still figuring that out. Now let us talk about why OpenAI became more powerful than many traditional startups. Most startups scale through network effects, software distribution, or marketplaces. OpenAI scaled through a new kind of cognitive distribution. People copied its output, shared screenshots, built workflows, taught classes, wrote books, made videos, created prompt libraries, built businesses, changed job descriptions, changed school policies, changed company strategies. ChatGPT did not only spread as a product, it spread as a concept. The idea of ask the AI in culture. That is one of the strongest forms of distribution. When a product becomes a behavior, the company behind it gains power. OpenAI became the default example of AI in everyday conversation. That is why competitors often define themselves in relation to it. Safer than OpenAI. More open than OpenAI. Cheaper than OpenAI. Better at coding than OpenAI. Better at search than OpenAI. More enterprise-ready than OpenAI. More uncensored than OpenAI. When everyone compares themselves to you, you are the reference point. That is power. Now let us examine the phrase most powerful startup. What does power mean here? It does not only mean valuation. OpenAI's power includes the power to shape public expectations, the power to influence big tech strategy, the power to affect cloud infrastructure spending, the power to define product categories, the power to influence regulation, the power to attract talent, the power to make enterprises reorganize their plans, the power to make competitors move faster, the power to become a daily tool for millions of people, the power to turn a research field into a consumer habit. That is broader than money. A startup can be valuable without being powerful. OpenAI is both. It changed behavior. It changed budgets. It changed roadmaps. It changed the language of business. Before ChatGPT, many executives talked about digital transformation. After ChatGPT, they talked about AI transformation. That shift created consulting projects, software budgets, cloud contracts, training programs, regulatory hearings, and startup funding. OpenAI moved the center of gravity. Now let us talk about the hidden cost of being first. OpenAI has to deal with problems before society has clear rules. Schools did not know how to handle AI-written homework. Companies did not know how to handle confidential data in chatbots. Courts did not know how to handle AI hallucinations in legal filings. Publishers did not know how to handle AI summaries. Governments did not know how to regulate. Workers did not know whether AI would help or replace them. Developers did not know how stable AI APIs would. Users did not know when to trust answers. OpenAI became the test case that gives it influence. It also creates backlash. Every mistake becomes evidence for critics. Every success increases pressure to deploy more. Every new capability raises the question of what comes next. This is a difficult position, but it is also how category leaders are made. The first company to bring a powerful technology to mass adoption often absorbs the early chaos. Then it builds the standard, policies, and expectations around that chaos. OpenAI is trying to do that for generative AI. Now let us talk about the competitive threat from open source models. OpenAI became famous with closed models. Users could access them, but the model weights were not openly released for the frontier system. Open source and open weight models challenged that approach. Meta's Llama models, Mistral, and other open model efforts gave developers alternatives. Open models can be cheaper, customizable, and easier to run privately. They appeal to companies that do not want total dependence on one API provider. They appeal to researchers and developers who value openness. They can improve quickly through community use. This creates pressure on OpenAI. If open models become good enough for many tasks, OpenAI must justify premium pricing with better quality, reliability tools, enterprise features, safety, and ease of use. This is healthy for the market. It is also dangerous for closed model margins. OpenAI's answer is to stay ahead at the frontier and build products around the models, because models alone may not be enough forever. The company needs memory, tools, agents, enterprise features, ecosystem, and trust. The next stage of OpenAI's power may depend less on the model leaderboard and whether it becomes the best place to get work done with AI. Now let us talk about agents. Chatbots answer. Agents act. OpenAI's future likely depends on moving from conversation to action. A chatbot can write a plan. An agent can execute parts of it. A chatbot can explain code. An agent can modify the repository, run tests, and open a pull request. A chatbot can draft an email. An agent can send it, follow up, and update a CRM. A chatbot can summarize a document. An agent can compare it with policy, flag issues, and route it to legal. This shift is important because agents create deeper business value. They also create deeper risk. If an AI only speaks, mistakes are limited to advice. If an AI acts, mistakes can move money, change records, send messages, approve workflows, or create legal exposure. OpenAI wants to lead this shift, but it has to do so carefully. The company that builds trusted agents could become the operating layer for white-collar work. The company that deploys reckless agents could cause disaster. This is why OpenAI's power could grow even more. If ChatGPT was the first mass interface for AI conversation, agents could become the first mass interface for AI labor. That is the bigger prize. Now let us talk about hardware. OpenAI's push into infrastructure is not optional. The company has learned that compute is destiny. If it cannot get enough GPS, it doesn't live. It cannot train and serve the models it wants. If it relies too heavily on one cloud or one chip supplier, its future can be constrained. If inference costs remain high, its business models suffer. If competitors secure more compute, they may catch up or pull ahead. That is why OpenAI has pursued giant data center and chip-related partnerships. The Stargate project, NVIDIA Systems Partnership, AMD deployment plans, Broadcom collaboration, and Microsoft infrastructure agreements all point in the same direction. OpenAI wants enormous compute capacity. This is what separates OpenAI from a normal software startup. The normal startup wants servers. OpenAI wants gigawatts. That is not a metaphor. AI's infrastructure is now discussed in energy terms. This changes the company's identity. OpenAI is no longer just building software. It is helping create an industrial supply chain for intelligence. That is how powerful AI has become. And it explains why OpenAI's valuation became so high. Investors are not only valuing today's chatbot revenue, they are valuing the possibility that OpenAI becomes one of the central platforms of the AI age. Maybe the default consumer assistant, maybe the default developer model provider, maybe the default enterprise AI layer, maybe a major agent platform, maybe an infrastructure-scale AI company, maybe the company closest to AGI. That is the dream priced into OpenAI. But dreams can be dangerous. If expectations outrun reality, the company faces pressure. If revenue grows but losses grow too, investors worry. If competitors narrow the gap, valuation becomes harder to justify. If regulation slows deployment, growth slows. If public trust falls, adoption suffers. The most powerful startup in the world also carries one of the heaviest expectation burdens intact. Now let us talk about public trust. OpenAI's product is intimate. People ask ChatGPT questions they might not ask coworkers. They ask for health explanations, relationship advice, legal summaries, career plans, emotional support, code debugging, business ideas, school help, and personal writing. That creates a different relationship than ordinary software. A spreadsheet does not feel like it understands you. The chatbot can feel like it does. This gives OpenAI enormous influence over how people think, learn, and decide. It also creates responsibility. If the system is wrong, users may still believe it. If it is biased, users may absorb that bias. If it overstates confidence, users may trust too much. If it becomes too persuasive, it may shape choices. If it becomes emotionally sticky, people may depend on it. OpenAI has to design not just for usefulness, but for human vulnerability. This is hard because the business wants engagement and retention. Safety wants restraint. Users want helpfulness. Regulators want protection. Competitors push the market. Again, incentives collide. Now let us talk about education. ChatGPT hit schools like a meteor. Some teachers saw cheating. Some saw tutoring. Some saw the end of homework as they knew it. Some saw a tool for students who needed help. Some banned it. Some embraced it. Some redesigned assignments. Students used it no matter what. This showed how quickly AI can disrupt institutions that move slowly. Education became one of the first public arenas where OpenAI's power was felt. The question was not simply, can students use AI? The deeper question was, if AI can explain, write, quiz, translate, and tutor, what is education for? That is a huge question. OpenAI did not answer it alone, but it forced the debate. Now, let us talk about software development. Developers were among the first power users. AI coding tools changed how many programmers work. They could generate boilerplate, explain errors, write tests, translate between languages, and help with unfamiliar frameworks. This did not eliminate programmers, but it changed expectations. A developer with AI could move faster. A junior developer could get help instantly. A senior developer could offload tedious work. Companies started imagining smaller, faster engineering teams. OpenAI's Codex-related work and model capabilities help push this trend. Coding is important because software is how modern companies operate. If AI changes coding, it changes the pace of business itself. Now let us talk about writing. OpenAI did not just threaten technical work. It affected language work, marketing copy, emails, reports, summaries, scripts, lesson plan, memos, customer support replies, product descriptions, legal drafts, policy documents. Language is everywhere in business. ChatGPT made language generation cheap and instant. This created excitement and fear. For some workers, it was a productivity tool. For others, it was competition. For companies, it was a way to reduce friction. For creators, it raised questions about originality, taste, and value. OpenAI's power came partly from touching the most common medium of words. That is why the impact was so broad. Now let us talk about the API economy. The API allowed AI to disappear into other products. Users might not know OpenAI was behind the feature, but OpenAI's models could power writing tools, research tools, customer support bots, coding assistants, analytics products, education apps, and internal company systems. This invisible presence matters. A company can be powerful even when users do not see its name. NVIDIA powers AI without most consumers touching an NVIDIA product directly. AWS powers websites users never associate with Amazon. OpenAI can power intelligence inside products users may not identify as OpenAI. This gives the company platform power. But platform power can be fragile if developers diversify. Many companies now use multiple model providers. They compare OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, Meta Models, Mistral, and others. They route tasks based on cost and quality. They avoid dependence on one vendor. This means OpenAI has to keep earning developer trust. Now let us talk about the speed of the company. OpenAI's release pace has been part of its strength. It launched ChatGPT, then better models, then plugins and tools, then GPT-4, then enterprise offerings, then multi-modem capabilities, then custom GPTs, then voice and vision features, then Sora, then newer generations, then more agent IC systems and developer tools. Not every release was perfect. Some features changed direction. Some products confused developers. Some launches created controversy. But the company kept moving. In technology, speed itself can be a weapon. Competitors have to respond. Customers stay interested. Investors keep believing. Talent wants to join. The market narrative stays centered on you. OpenAI's speed created momentum. Momentum can hide problems for a while, but it also lets a company learn faster. The question is whether OpenAI can maintain speed while becoming safer, more reliable, and more institutional. That is the challenge of growing up. Now let us talk about internal culture. OpenAI's culture has always been unusual because it combines research idealism, startup intensity, safety anxiety, and commercial ambition. Those ingredients do not always mix smoothly. Researchers want time and caution. Product teams want launches. Policy teams want guardrails. Sales teams want enterprise commitment. Infrastructure teams want capacity planning. Executives want strategic. Investors want growth. The mission wants broad benefit. This creates internal pressure. As OpenAI grew, it could no longer operate like a small lab where everyone knew everything. It needed management systems, governance, compliance, HR, enterprise support, legal teams, communications, security, and global operations. That is a major transformation. Many startups struggle when they scale from a few hundred employees to thousands. OpenAI had to do it while being watched by the world. The company had to become more corporate while still acting like a frontier lab. That is difficult. If it becomes too corporate, it may lose speed. If it stays too chaotic, it may lose trust. Now let us talk about the public benefit promise. OpenAI's updated structure emphasizes that the for-profit is a public benefit corporation and that the nonprofit foundation remains part of the structure. This is meant to show that the mission still matters, but structures do not enforce themselves. People enforce them. Boards enforce them. Lawyers interpret them. Markets pressure them. Customers influence them. Regulators challenge them. The real question is not what the structure says on paper. It is how the structure behaves under pressure. What happens if slowing down is safer but faster growth is more profitable? What happens if a partner wants special access? What happens if investors want returns? What happens if a model has risky capabilities but competitors are close? What happens if open release helps society but hurts business? What happens if closed release helps safety but concentrates power? These are hard questions. OpenAI's mission is easy to quote and hard to live. That does not mean it is fake. It means the mission exists inside conflict. Now let us talk about regulation. OpenAI has played a major role in shaping AI policy conversation. Sam Altman appeared before lawmakers. The company engaged with governments. It discussed safety standards, model evaluations, deployment practices, and responsible AI. It also faced scrutiny from regulators, privacy authorities, competition authorities, and policymakers. This is another sign of power. Small startups usually ask regulators for permission later. OpenAI meets regulators while the rules are being written. That gives it influence. It also creates suspicion. Some critics worry that large AI companies may shape regulation in ways that protect incumbents and make it harder for smaller competitors. A rule that sounds like safety may also raise barriers to entry. A licensing requirement may favor companies with legal teams and infrastructure. A compute reporting rule may affect frontier labs more than small developers. This is the balance policymakers must handle. OpenAI says safety matters. Critics say safety cannot become a moat. Both points matter. Now let us talk about global competition. OpenAI is an American company, but AI is a global race. China is building its own models and AI infrastructure. Europe wants regulation, sovereignty, and local champions. The Middle East is investing heavily in AI infrastructure. India has huge developer and user markets. Japan, South Korea, Singapore, and others are building national AI strategies. Governments see AI as economic and strategic infrastructure. OpenAI's power is therefore geopolitical. When a company can shape productivity, information, defense, education, healthcare, and software development, governments pay attention. OpenAI's partnerships and infrastructure plans are not just business deals. They sit inside national AI strategy. That is another reason the company became so powerful. It is not simply selling software. It is part of a national technology race. Now let us talk about the future of search. OpenAI also threatens Google in one of the most valuable businesses on earth, search. If users ask ChatGPT instead of Googling, the old search habit weakens. If AI answers replace pages of links, the advertising model changes. If agents can research an ad, search may become less visible. OpenAI does not need to kill Google search overnight to matter. It only needs to change user expectation. ChatGPT trained people to ask full questions and expect direct answers. That is already a challenge to traditional search. This is why Google moved aggressively with AI answers in Gemini. OpenAI forced Google to defend its core habit. That is power. Now let us talk about media generation. Text was only the beginning. Images, audio, and video expand OpenAI's influence into creative industries. DAL showed text-to-image generation could become a consumer and creator tool. Sora pushed the conversation toward AI video, raising excitement and alarm in film, advertising, education, and social media. Video is especially important because video dominates online attention. If AI makes video production cheaper and faster, media economics could change. Small creators may gain new powers. Studios may automate parts of production. Advertisers may generate endless variation. Disinformation risks may rise. Creative labor may be disrupted. OpenAI's media tools make it part of the future of entertainment, advertising, and storytelling. That expands its power beyond office work. Now let us talk about voice. Voice makes AI feel more human. Typing is deliberate. Talking is natural. If AI assistants become fast, expressive, and useful through voice, people may use them more often. They may ask questions while walking, driving, cooking, working, or learning. Voice AI could become a tutor, assistant, coach, translator, companion, and customer service interface. This creates both opportunity and risk. A voice assistant can be more accessible. It can also become more emotionally persuasive. OpenAI's voice capabilities place it in the race for the next interface after the keyboard. That is a major strategic battlefield. Now let us talk about why OpenAI scares competitors. It has several advantages at once: brand, users, talent, models, developer platform, enterprise demand, Microsoft partnership, infrastructure ambition, media attention, regulatory influence, cultural relevance. Most companies have one or two. OpenAI has many. That makes it hard to attack. If you beat OpenAI on price, it may still win on quality. If you beat it on one benchmark, it may still win on brand. If you beat it with open models, it may still win enterprise trust. If you beat it in enterprise, it may still win consumers. If you beat it in consumer chat, it may still win API developers. If you beat it in models, it may win through products. But this breadth also creates focus risk. The company can be stretched. It cannot do everything perfectly. This creates openings for rivals. Anthropic can focus on trust and enterprise safety. Google can integrate AI into search and Android and workspace. Meta can push open models. Perplexity can specialize in AI search. NVIDIA can own compute. Apple can own the device experience. Microsoft can own enterprise distribution. Specialized startups can solve narrow workflows better. OpenAI may be powerful, but the AI economy is too large for one company to own everything. The question is which layer OpenAI ultimately controls: the model layer, the assistant layer, the agent layer, the developer layer, the enterprise layer, the consumer relationship, the infrastructure layer. The answer may define the next decade. Now let us look at the worker perspective. For many people, OpenAI's rise is not an abstract tech story. It is a job story. Writers wonder if AI will reduce writing work. Programmers wonder if coding will change. Customer support workers wonder if chatbots will replace them. Designers wonder about image tools. Analysts wonder about automated reports. Lawyers wonder about document review. Teachers wonder about tutoring and cheating. Managers wonder whether teams can become smaller. OpenAI did not invent automation, but ChatGPT made white-collar automation feel immediate. That is why the company is powerful in the labor market imagination. It changed what people think machines can do. Even when the fears are exaggerated, the perception changes behavior. People learn AI tools. Companies redesign roles. Schools adjust policies. Job postings mention AI skills. Consultants sell AI transformation. Workers worry about being left behind. OpenAI became part of career planning. That is enormous influence. Now let us talk about the user base. ChatGPT's growth showed that AI could become a mass daily product. Millions and then hundreds of millions of users made AI part of ordinary life. Even when exact numbers shifted across reports and time periods, the direction was clear. ChatGPT became one of the fastest adopted consumer technologies in history. This adoption matters for two reasons. First, data and feedback. Users reveal what they want, where models fail, which features matter, and what use cases are valuable. Second, habit. The more people use ChatGPT, the more natural AI assistance becomes. Habits are powerful moats. A competitor may release a good model, but if users already have chats, workflows, subscriptions, custom settings, team accounts, and trust inside ChatGPT, switching is not automatic. OpenAI is trying to turn first-mover mindshare into durable habit. Now let us talk about the danger of becoming the default. Defaults get blamed. If people rely on ChatGPT and it, OpenAI gets blamed. If students misuse it, OpenAI gets blamed. If companies leak data into it, OpenAI gets blamed. If outputs are biased, OpenAI gets blamed. If deepfakes spread, AI companies get blamed. If jobs are disrupted, OpenAI becomes a symbol. Being the face of AI means absorbing anger directed at the whole industry. That is part of the cost of power. Now let us discuss OpenAI's relationship with openness. The name OpenAI carries a promise. In the early years, the company talked about publishing research and sharing benefits. Over time, as models became more powerful and commercially valuable, OpenAI became more closed with its frontier system. The company argues that safety and misuse risks require caution. It also has commercial reasons to protect its models. Critics argue that the company moved away from its founding spirit. This debate will not go away. The name itself keeps the issue alive. If OpenAI were called something else, critics might still complain. But the word open makes the contrast sharper. This is another strange part of OpenAI's story. Its brand contains its own criticism. Now let us talk about AGI. Artificial general intelligence is the company's North Star. But AGI is also a slippery concept. People disagree on what it means. Human level at most economically valuable work? Better than humans at most cognitive tasks? A system that can learn and adapt broadly? A system that cannot autonomously do science? A system that transforms the economy? OpenAI's mission uses AGI as the central idea, but the exact threshold is debated. This matters because the company's structure, partnerships, and safety commitments often refer to AGI. If OpenAI one day claims it has achieved AGI, who decide? What happens to Microsoft rights? What safety measures apply? What does society do? What does benefits all of humanity mean in practice? These are not science fiction questions anymore. They are contractual, regulatory, and governance questions. That is how far OpenAI has pushed the debate. Now let us talk about why OpenAI's story is so cinematic. It has everything. A nonprofit origin, billionaire founders, a mission to save humanity, a transformation into a capped profit company, a giant partnership with Microsoft, a breakthrough consumer product, a sudden global AI boom, a CEO fired and restored in days, a boardroom crisis, a battle over safety and speed, lawsuits over data, massive valuations, gigawatt infrastructure plans, rivals racing to catch up, governments watching, workers anxious, investors excited, a company name that promises openness while guarding frontier models. You could not design a more dramatic business story. But the drama is not just entertainment. It reveals the pressures that any frontier AI company will face. If the technology matters enough, it attracts money. If it attracts money, governance gets harder. If it grows fast, safety gets harder. If it becomes useful, dependency grows. If it becomes powerful, politics enter. If it becomes profitable, mission is tested. OpenAI is the first major company to experience all of this at global scale. That is why it matters beyond itself. Now let us talk about the next phase. OpenAI's future may depend on 5 battles. The first battle is model quality. Can it keep producing systems that are clearly among the best in the world? The second battle is cost. Can it make those systems cheap enough to serve billions of users and profitable enough to sustain the business? The third battle is trust. Can users, enterprises, governments, and developers believe OpenAI will handle data, safety, and influence responsibly? The fourth battle is distribution. Can OpenAI stay close to consumers, developers, and enterprises even as Google, Microsoft, Apple, Meta, Amazon, and others push AI into their platforms? The fifth battle is control of infrastructure. Can OpenAI secure enough compute, chips, energy, and cloud capacity to avoid being constrained by others? If OpenAI wins these battles, it could become one of the defining companies of the century. If it loses any one of them badly, its power could weaken quickly. That is the nature of frontier technology. The lead is valuable, but the ground moves fast. Now let us imagine 3 possible futures. In the first future, OpenAI becomes the dominant AI platform. ChatGPT becomes the default assistant. Developers build on OpenAI. Enterprises use OpenAI agents. Infrastructure partnerships give it enough compute. Revenue grows fast enough to support spending. The company manages safety well enough to retain trust. OpenAI becomes the Microsoft or Google of the AI age. In the second future, OpenAI remains important but not dominant. AI fragments across many providers. Google owns some layers. Microsoft owns some. Anthropic wins trust in certain enterprises. Meta and open models reduce pricing power. Apple controls personal AI on devices. OpenAI stays huge, but the market is shared. In the third future, OpenAI's lead erodes. Open models catch up. Costs stay high. Trust problems grow. Regulation slows deployment. Competitors use distribution advantages. The company remains famous but loses its central position. All 3 futures are possible. The reason OpenAI is powerful today is not because its victory is guaranteed. It is because everyone must plan around it. That is power in strategy. You become the fact others cannot ignore. Now let us talk about what OpenAI teaches founders. The first lesson is that timing matters. OpenAI did not invent every idea behind modern AI, but it launched the right product at the right moment. The second lesson is that packaging matters. A conversational interface made AI accessible. The third lesson is that infrastructure matters. Without compute, the model does not scale. The fourth lesson is that business model matters. Research alone was not enough. OpenAI needed capital and monetization. The fifth lesson is that governance matters. A structure that works for a small lab may break under global pressure. The sixth lesson is that narrative matters. OpenAI made AI feel like the future, and that narrative attracted users' talent, capital, and scrutiny. The seventh lesson is that power changes the mission. Once the world depends on you, every decision becomes political. Now let us talk about what OpenAI teaches workers. Do not think of AI as a single tool. Think of it as a new layer in the workplace. The first wave helped people write and summarize. The next wave helps people act through agents. The long-term wave may change how companies organize work. Workers who understand how to use AI thoughtfully may gain leverage. Workers whose roles are mostly repetitive language tasks may face pressure. Managers will need to redesign workflows. Companies will need to decide where humans remain essential. OpenAI's tools are part of that shift, but not the whole shift. The broader AI economy will keep moving with or without one company. Now let us talk about what OpenAI teaches society. A technology can be useful and disruptive at the same time. A company can have a genuine mission and still face commercial pressure. Safety and speed are both real concerns. Openness and control both have argument. Regulation can protect people, but it can also entrench incumbents if designed badly. Public trust matters as much as model benchmarks. OpenAI forced these questions into the open. That may be one of its biggest impacts. Before ChatGPT, many AI debates felt abstract. After ChatGPT, people had a concrete thing to argue about. That changed public understanding. Now let us talk about the emotional side of OpenAI's rise. People feel wonder. They feel fear. They feel curiosity. They feel anger. They feel opportunity. They feel suspicion. They feel dependent. They feel excitement. That mix is rare. Most software is boring. OpenAI's products made people question what intelligence is, what work is, what creativity is, and what humans are still uniquely good at. That is why the story goes beyond business. A company becomes truly powerful when its product enters people's imagination of themselves. ChatGPT did that. It made people ask, am I a better writer with this? Am I replaceable? Can I learn faster? Can I build more? Can I trust this? What happens to my job? What happens to my child at school? What happens to truth? What happens to creativity? What happens next? No spreadsheet app creates that kind of existential debate. OpenAI did. Now let us look at the paradox one more time. OpenAI was created because people feared that advanced AI might become too powerful in the wrong hands. To prevent that, OpenAI set out to build advanced AI itself. To build it, it needed money. To get money, it created a for-profit structure. To scale, it partnered with Microsoft. To reach the world, it launched ChatGPT. To support demand, it needed massive infrastructure. To keep leading, it needed more products, more talent, more capital, more compute, and more influence. By trying to prevent concentrated AI power, OpenAI became concentrated AI power. This is not just hypocrisy. It is the tragedy of the problem. If you believe advanced AI will be extremely powerful, then someone must build it, govern it, and deploy it. If you do not build it, someone else may. If you do build it, you become powerful. If you become powerful, you must be governed. If governance is weak, the mission is at risk. If governance is too slow, competitors may outrun you. If competitors outrun you, safety may suffer. If you race, safety may suffer too. There is no easy path. OpenAI's story is the story of that impossible path. That is why people disagree so strongly about it. Some see OpenAI as the company that gave humanity useful AI tools. Some see it as the company that accelerated a dangerous race. Some see it as a practical compromise between mission and capital. Some see it as a mission captured by capital. Some see it as a startup changing the world. Some see it as an institution that should be regulated like critical infrastructure. All of these views exist because OpenAI is not one simple thing. It is a lab, a product company, a platform, a policy actor, a cloud customer, an infrastructure builder, a consumer brand, an enterprise vendor, always safety experiment, a commercial giant, a cultural symbol. That combination is why it became the most powerful startup in the world. Now let us bring the story to the present. OpenAI stands at the center of the AI economy, but the center is unstable. The company needs to keep improving models while reducing costs. It needs to serve consumers while winning enterprises. It needs to maintain Microsoft partnership while expanding independence. It needs to satisfy investors while claiming mission alignment. It needs to move fast while proving safety. It needs to fight lawsuits while signing content deals. It needs to shape regulation without appearing to capture it. It needs to build infrastructure while avoiding financial overreach. It needs to lead a market where every giant wants a piece. That is an extraordinary burden. The next few years will decide whether OpenAI becomes a durable platform or the first explosive chapter of a larger AI era. Either way, it has already changed history. Before OpenAI, I was often invisible infrastructure. After OpenAI, I became a conversation partner. Before ChatGPT, many people thought advanced AI was still far away. After ChatGPT, every boardroom had to respond. Before OpenAI's rise, the AI race was mostly a contest among labs and tech giants. After its rise, I became a public, economic, and political race. That is why this company matters. Not because it is perfect, not because it has all the answers, not because it will definitely win forever. It matters because it made the future arrive early. And once people see the future, they cannot unsee it. The world before ChatGPT already feels distant. That is the mark of a powerful company. It changes the timeline. OpenAI changed the timeline. The question now is whether it can control what comes after. Because building a powerful technology is one thing, surviving the power it creates is another. OpenAI's rise began with a promise. AI should benefit humanity. Its future will be judged by whether that promise can survive contact with money competition, infrastructure, politics, and ambition. That is the real story. Not just how OpenAI became powerful, but whether the company that became powerful because of the mission can still be trusted with the power that mission created. The world is no longer asking whether AI matters. OpenAI answered that question. Now the world is asking who should control it. And OpenAI, more than any other startup, is standing in the middle of that question. That is why its story is not finished. It may be the beginning of a new computing platform. It may be the beginning of a new industrial race. It may be the beginning of a new kind of company. It may be the beginning of a much harder debate about intelligence, labor, truth, and power. But one thing is already clear. A nonprofit research lab started with a fear that AI might become too important to leave in the wrong hands. 10 years later, the lab had become the company everyone watched. Used, feared, copied, funded, sued, partnered with, and tried to regulate. That is how OpenAI became the most powerful startup in the world. Not by building another app, by making intelligence feel like a product. And once intelligence became a product, every company on Earth had to decide what to do next. That is power. And OpenAI has it. For now, there is another way to understand OpenAI's rise. Think of every great technology company as controlling a gateway. Google controlled the gateway to information. Facebook controlled the gateway to social identity and attention. Amazon controlled the gateway to online commerce and cloud infrastructure. Apple controlled the gateway to mobile computing. Microsoft controlled the gateway to office work and enterprise software. NVIDIA became the gateway to accelerated computing. OpenAI is trying to control a new gateway, the gateway to machine intelligence. That sounds abstract, but it is very practical. When a worker wants to write, they may ask ChatGPT. When a developer wants help debugging, they may ask a coding model. When a company wants to build a support bot, it may use an OpenAI API. When a student wants an explanation, they may open ChatGPT. When a manager wants a summary, they may use an AI assistant. When an entrepreneur wants a business plan, they may start with a prompt. Each of those moments is small. Together, they create a gateway. A gateway is powerful because it sits at the beginning of intent. Search captured intent when people looked for information. Social networks captured intent when people wanted connection and entertainment. Marketplaces captured intent when people wanted to buy. AI assistants capture intent when people want to think, create, decide, or act. That is a huge surface area. OpenAI's ambition is not only to answer questions. It is to be close to the moment when a person or company decides what to do. That is why the company matters to so many industries. If AI becomes the first draft of everything, the company providing that first draft has influence. If AI becomes the first research assistant, it shapes what people consider. If AI becomes the first coding helper, it shapes software. If AI becomes the first business analyst, it shapes strategy. If AI becomes the first customer service agent, it shapes customer experience. If AI becomes the first teacher, it shapes learning. If AI becomes the first creative collaborator, it shapes culture. The first answer matters. The first draft matters. The first suggestion matters. OpenAI wants to be there. This is why the company is not just selling productivity. It is competing for cognitive real estate. Cognitive real estate is the space inside people's workflows where thinking begins. That space is extremely valuable. Once a tool becomes part of how you think, it is hard to remove. This is why ChatGPT's memory, personalization, tools, files, voice, images, and agents matter. They are not random features. They are ways to make the assistant more useful, more personal, and more embedded. A plain chatbot can be replaced. A personalized work companion with your context, tools, history, and workflows is harder to leave. That is the platform strategy. OpenAI needs to turn novelty into dependency. Dependency is where software profits are made. But dependency on AI is more sensitive than dependency on ordinary software. If you depend on a spreadsheet, you can still understand the numbers. If you depend on an AI assistant, you may begin to outsource parts of your thinking. That makes trust central. OpenAI's future depends on whether people trust the system enough to use it, but not so blindly that mistakes create disaster. This is a delicate balance. The company wants users to rely on it. It also has to remind users that it can be wrong. That is an unusual product problem. Most software companies want users to trust the product completely. AI companies have to teach calibrated trust. Trust it enough to use it. Question it enough to stay safe. That is hard to communicate at scale. Now let us talk about the product design genius of ChatGPT. The interface looks simple, almost too simple. They text box into conversation. But that simplicity hit a radical idea. The user no longer had to learn the software had to understand the user. Traditional software makes users adapt to menus, buttons, settings, workflows, file types, and commands. ChatGPT flipped the feeling. You could speak naturally. The system tried to respond naturally. That is why the product spread so fast. It reduced the cost of trying. A user did not need a manual. They could ask anything. This made ChatGPT feel universal. A designer could use it. A lawyer could use it. A child could use it. A CEO could use it. A programmer could use it. A teacher could use it. A marketer could use it. A non-native English speaker could use it. A founder could use it. The same interface served many jobs because language sits underneath. That is why the market was so large. OpenAI did not need to build a separate app for every profession. It built a general assistant and let users discover use cases. This is one reason the launch was so explosive. The product invited imagination. People did not wait for OpenAI to tell them what it was for. They tried their own problems. That created organic discovery at massive scale. In business terms, ChatGPT had unusually broad horizontal product market. It was not perfect at any one profession. It was useful enough across many professions. That is a very powerful starting point. From there, OpenAI could move into verticals: coding, enterprise, education, customer service, creative tools, data analysis, and agent. This is how broad platforms grow. Start general. Find repeated use cases. Build deeper tools. Monetize the valuable workflow. OpenAI is still in that process. Now let us talk about pricing psychology. When ChatGPT Plus launched, it proved something important. People would pay monthly for better access to AI. That may sound obvious now. It was not obvious before. Consumers are used to free search, free social media, then cheap apps. But ChatGPT created enough value that many users accepted a subscription. This changed the AI business conversation. If users pay directly, OpenAI does not have to rely only on ads. If enterprises pay, the company can build predictable revenue. If developers pay per use, the company becomes infrastructure. If partners pay through licensing or integration, OpenAI expands distribution. Multiple revenue streams make the company more powerful, but they also create strategic choices. Ads could unlock huge revenue but may harm trust if answers feel influenced. Subscriptions are cleaner but may limit access for some users. Enterprise deals are lucrative but require support and compliance. API revenue scales with developers but faces competition and cost pressure. Agent workflows could create new pricing models but require reliability. OpenAI has to choose how to monetize intelligence without making users feel exploited. That is not easy. Google's business model was ads besides search. OpenAI's business model may become subscriptions, enterprise contracts, API usage, agent workflows, and maybe commerce or advertising in some form. The final shape is still forming. This uncertainty is part of why investors value OpenAI so highly. They are not betting on one product. They are betting on many possible monetization paths around intelligence. Now let us talk about the role of scarcity. In the AI economy, the scarcest resources are frontier research talent, high-quality data, compute, trust, capital. OpenAI has had strong access to all of them. It attracted top researchers early. It created a product that generated massive user feedback. It secured Microsoft infrastructure. It built consumer distribution through ChatGPT. It gained enterprise credibility. It raised capital at extraordinary valuation. This combination is rare. Many competitors have some of these. You have all. Google has talent, data, compute, distribution, and capital, but its search business creates strategic constraints. Microsoft has distribution, capital, cloud, and enterprise trust, but relies on partners for some frontier model identity. Anthropic has talent and trust positioning that lets consumer min share. Meta has talent, capital, distribution, and open model strategy, but different business incentives. Open source communities have speed and openness, but less centralized capital and infrastructure. Startups have focus but not scale. OpenAI's advantage is that it became the public face of the new category while also securing serious resources. That is why it could punch above the normal startup weight class. Now let us talk about the biggest risk to OpenAI's model parity. If many models become similarly good, users and businesses may choose based on price, privacy, integration, speed, or politics. That could weaken OpenAI. A company may say, we do not need the absolute best model. We need a good enough model that is cheaper and runs in our own environment. This is already happening in parts of the market. For simple tasks, smaller models can be enough. For internal workflows, open models may be attractive. For regulated data, private deployment may be preferred. For cost-sensitive products, model routing may reduce OpenAI usage. OpenAI's response must be lean. Keep frontier quality high. Make products easier. Build trust. Offer enterprise-grade controls. Reduce cost. Create agent experiences that are hard to replicate. Use brand and habit. This is why product matters more over time. A model lead can shrink. A product ecosystem can endure. Now let us talk about why OpenAI entered the public imagination faster than DeepMind. DeepMind had stunning achievement. AlphaGo beating Lee Sedol was one of the great AI moments. AlphaFold was scientifically important. DeepMind had elite research credibility. But DeepMind's breakthroughs often felt like events you watched from the outside. ChatGPT was something you used yourself. That is the difference. Watching an AI beat a Go champion is impressive. Asking an AI to help with your work is personal. OpenAI won the personal moment. That did not mean it was scientifically ahead in every way. It meant it owned the user experience that made AI feel immediate. In consumer technology, personal experience beats abstract achievement. That is a key reason OpenAI became the startup at the center of the AI boom. Now let us talk about the role of surprise. ChatGPT surprised people because it crossed a threshold. Below the threshold, AI feels like a gimmick. Above the threshold, people start reorganizing their behavior. ChatGPT crossed the threshold for enough tasks. It was not perfectly reliable, but it was good enough to save time, good enough to inspire, good enough to scare, good enough to make people ask what version 2, 3, and 4 would look like. In technology, good enough to change imagination is sometimes more important than perfect. OpenAI reached that state before competitors put a similar public product into mass use. That early min share became a moat. Now let us talk about backlash. No company rises this fast without backlash. OpenAI faced criticism from artists, writers, publishers, safety researchers, former employees, privacy advocates, educators, competitors, and regulators. Some criticism was about data, some about transparency, some about safety, some about labor disruption, some about governance, some about concentration of power, some about the shift from nonprofit ideals to commercial reality. OpenAI has had to answer many audiences at once. This is difficult because those audiences want different. Users want useful tools. Creators want compensation and control. Enterprises want security. Developers want access. Regulators want safety. Investors want growth. Employees want mission and stability. Partners want strategic. The public wants benefits without harm. No company can fully satisfy everyone. The way OpenAI handles trade-offs will shape its long-term reputation. Now let us talk about what power does to a mission. A mission is easiest when you are small. You can be pure because the world does not depend on you. You can publish openly because capabilities are limited. You can criticize big tech because you are not yet big tech. You can say money will not drive you because you do not yet need billions. Then the technology works, the company grows, the users arrive, the money arrives, the risks arrive, the competitors arrive, the lawsuits arrive, the government arrives. Now the mission must operate in reality. This is where many mission-driven organizations change, not always because people become cynical, sometimes because the problem becomes larger than the original structure can handle. OpenAI's supporters would say its evolution was necessary. Its critics would say it was mission drift. The truth may be that necessity and drift can look similar from the outside. That is why OpenAI's story will be debated for years. Now let us talk about the OpenAI Foundation and the nonprofit control idea. The updated structure tries to preserve a public benefit mission while allowing the for-profit company to raise the capital needed for frontier AI. This is a difficult balance. The foundation's stake and control mechanisms are meant to keep the mission alive, but the for-profit company has investors, employees, partners, customers, and huge commercial obligations. The question is whether mission control can remain real as the financial stakes grow. If OpenAI becomes worth hundreds of billions or even more, every governance decision carries enormous economic implications. A decision to slow deployment could affect valuation. A decision to open a model could affect competitive advantage. A decision to restrict a product could affect revenue. A decision to partner with one cloud over another could affect billions in infrastructure. Mission governance is easy to praise and hard to practice under that pressure. This will be one of the most important things to watch. Now let us discuss OpenAI's infrastructure dreams in more detail. Why does it need so much compute? Because frontier AI development has to compute problems. Inference, training is building the model. Inference is serving the model to users. Both are expensive. Training next-generation models may require massive clusters, specialized chips, high-speed networking, and huge energy capacity. Serving hundreds of millions of users, developers, and enterprises requires constant inference capacity. If agents become popular, inference demand could multiply because one user request may trigger many model calls. This means OpenAI needs compute not only to stay ahead in research, but to run the business. Capacity becomes destiny. If OpenAI lacks compute, it cannot train as fast. If it cannot serve users reliably, the product suffers. If costs are too high, margins suffer. If competitors have better infrastructure, they can catch up. This is why OpenAI's power increasingly depends on industrial partnerships. NVIDIA, AMD, Broadcom, Microsoft, Oracle-related infrastructure, Stargate, and other deals are all part of the same strategy. Do not let compute scarcity decide the company's fate. This makes OpenAI similar to a car company trying to secure batteries, or an energy company securing drilling rights, or a chip company securing foundry capacity. The supply chain becomes strategy. Now let us talk about the strained relationship between OpenAI and NVIDIA. NVIDIA benefits from OpenAI's growth because OpenAI needs advanced AI hardware. OpenAI benefits from NVIDIA's chips because they power training and inference. But OpenAI also has incentives to reduce dependence on NVIDIA over time through custom silicon or alternative providers. This is the same pattern across AI. Everyone partners because they need each other. Everyone competes because dependence is dangerous. OpenAI wants more compute from NVIDIA. It also wants AMD. It wants custom accelerators. It wants more data centers. It wants bargaining power. This is how powerful companies behaved. They diversify their critical dependencies. Now let us talk about the public narrative around AGI. OpenAI's focus on AGI gives it a grand story. It is not just making tools. It is building toward a system that can transform civilization. This story attracts talent. It attracts believers. It attracts capital. It attracts media attention. It attracts fear. But it also raises the stakes of every decision. If OpenAI were just building office software, mistakes would be business problems. In OpenAI is building toward AGI. Mistakes become civilization problems in the public imagination. That makes the company more powerful and more scrutinized. The AGI mission is a magnet. It pulls in money, talent, criticism, and pressure. Now let us talk about competitors using different moral positions. Anthropic positions itself strongly around safety and responsible development. Meta positions itself around openness and open model. Google positions itself around deep research and integrated product. XAI positions itself around speed, personality, and less constrained systems. Mistral positions itself around European strength and openness. Perplexity positions itself around answer search. Microsoft positions itself around productivity and enterprise deployment. Each rival attacks a different part of OpenAI's identity. If OpenAI is too closed, Meta attacks. If OpenAI is too risky, Anthropic attacks. If OpenAI lacks distribution, Google and Microsoft attack. If OpenAI is too expensive, open models attack. If OpenAI becomes too corporate, startups attack. If OpenAI moves too slowly, XAI attacks. If OpenAI does not own search, Perplexity attacks. OpenAI has to defend the center while competitors take sharp edges. That is hard. But the center is valuable. OpenAI's brand lets it speak to consumers, developers, enterprises, and policymakers. Few companies can do that. Now let us talk about the role of media. OpenAI became a media phenomenon. Every release becomes news. Every leadership change becomes news. Every partnership becomes news. Every legal issue becomes news. Every safety controversy becomes news. Every model rumor becomes news. This constant attention helps and hurts. It helps because OpenAI stays in public conversation. It hurts because every mistake is amplified. A smaller company can fail quietly. OpenAI fails publicly. That is another cost of power. Now let us talk about the difference between being admired and being trusted. OpenAI is widely admired for what it built, but trust is more complicated. Users may admire ChatGPT and still worry about privacy. Developers may admire models and still fear dependency. Enterprises may admire capabilities and still test competitors. Regulators may admire innovation and still want rules. Employees may admire the mission and still worry about governance. Creators may admire technology and still resent training practices. OpenAI must convert admiration into trust. That is the long game. Admiration gets attention. Trust gets durability. Now let us talk about the startup label again. OpenAI has startup speed and startup mythology, but its responsibilities look more like a major institution. This creates a mismatch. A startup can move fast and break things. A company building frontier AI cannot casually break important things. A startup can pivot. OpenAI cannot pivot away from the world it has already changed. A startup can keep secrets. A company shaping AI policy faces demands for transparency. A startup can treat governance as paperwork. OpenAI's governance can affect global confidence in AI. OpenAI is no longer a normal startup. It is a startup with institutional consequences. That may be the most accurate description. Now let us talk about why users keep coming back despite flaws. ChatGPT is useful in small, everyday ways. It rewrites messages, explains confusing topics, helps with code, plans trips, summarizes documents, brainstorms names, creates outlines, turns messy notes into structure, translates, role plays interviews, explains errors, drafts proposals, helps people start. These small uses matter. A technology does not become daily because of one grand use case. It becomes daily because it helps with many small frictions. OpenAI's product is powerful because it attacks friction across thinking and communication. People are busy. Writing is hard. Starting is hard. Understanding is hard. Organizing is hard. ChatGPT helps people begin. That is a deep product advantage. The first draft is often the hardest part. OpenAI made first drafts cheap. Now let us talk about how the changes work. When first drafts become cheap, the value of work from drafting to editing, from producing to judging, from remembering to asking, from manual research to verification, from routine writing to taste and strategy. I'm doing every step to supervising AI-assisted workflow. This does not eliminate humans, but it changes what humans are paid for. OpenAI's tools are part of that shift. That is why the company is powerful in the labor debate. It did not just automate one profession. It touched the general layer of knowledge work. Now let us talk about the danger of over-reliance. If people use ChatGPT for everything, they may lose skills. If students rely too much, learning may weaken. If workers accept outputs without checking, errors spread. If companies automate workflows without understanding them, they become fragile. If users treat AI as authority, misinformation becomes polished. If managers use AI to cut labor without redesigning training, future expertise may suffer. These are real concerns. OpenAI cannot solve all of them alone, but its product design influences behavior. This is why AI literacy matters. The world needs to learn how to use AI, ask better questions, check sources, understand limitations, protect private data, use models for drafts, not in question truth, know when human expertise is needed, know when not to automate. OpenAI's power comes with a need to educate users. Now let us talk about the board crisis as a metaphor. The Arding Arsene crisis was dramatic because it compressed the whole OpenAI tension into a few days. Mission versus market, board versus CEO, safety versus speed, nonprofit control versus commercial reality, Microsoft partnership versus independent, employees versus directors, public trust versus private governance. It was like watching the company's contradictions become visible all at once. Altman's return did not erase those contradictions. It showed which forces were strongest at that moment. Employees wanted continuity. Investors wanted stability. Microsoft wanted reliability. Users and customers wanted the product to keep moving. The board's mission authority was not enough to override the ecosystem. That is a lesson for every AI governance model. Formal control matters, but ecosystem power matters too. Now let us talk about why OpenAI's future may depend on becoming boring. This sounds strange. OpenAI became famous by being exciting, but durable infrastructure companies eventually need to become reliable. Banks do not want drama from their AI provider. Hospitals do not want drama. Governments do not want drama. Enterprises do not want surprise outages, sudden policy shifts, or leadership chaos. To win the next phase, OpenAI has to keep innovating while becoming dependable. That means better governance, better communication, better product stability, better enterprise support, better safety process, better cost predictability, better regulatory relationships. In other words, less chaos. The company that made AI exciting now has to make AI trustworthy. That is a different skill. Now let us talk about the possible IPO. Reports have discussed OpenAI preparing for a possible giant IPO in the future. Whether, when, and how it happens can change, but the idea matters. An IPO would force more transparency. It would create public market pressure. It would let employees and investors realize value. It would make OpenAI even more visible. It would also intensify the tension between mission and quarterly expectation. Public markets can be impatient. If OpenAI becomes a public company, investors may ask, where is revenue growth? Where are margins? How much capex is needed? When does AI pay off? How durable is the moat? What are the legal risks? What is the governance structure? What happens if AGI is declared? These questions are already being asked privately. Public markets would ask them loudly. That could change the company's behavior. Now let us talk about the cultural change inside big companies caused by OpenAI. Before ChatGPT, many AI teams inside large companies struggled to get executive attention. After ChatGPT, every executive wanted an AI roadmap. This changed internal politics. AI teams got more budget. Data teams became more important. Cloud spending increased. Consultants sold AI strategy. Employees received AI training. Boards asked about AI risk. Legal teams wrote AI policies. Security teams reviewed AI tools. HR departments worried about productivity and job design. OpenAI indirectly created business for many other companies. Cloud providers, consultants, chip makers, data platforms, AI safety vendors, security firms, education companies, automation agencies, prompt training courses, productivity software companies. A truly powerful startup creates markets around itself. OpenAI did. Now let us talk about what happens if OpenAI succeeds too well. If OpenAI's tools become deeply embedded in work, education, creativity, and communication, society becomes dependent on a private AI platform. That raises questions. Should one company have that much influence? Should models be auditable? Should users have rights over AI decisions? Should governance require interoperability? Should critical AI systems have public oversight? Should there be open alternatives? Should AI infrastructure be treated as critical? These questions are not anti-OpenAI. They are consequences of success. The more useful OpenAI becomes, the more society must decide how much dependency is acceptable. This is the paradox of platform power. A platform becomes important by being useful. Then its usefulness becomes a governance problem. Now let us talk about what happens if OpenAI stumbles. A major trust failure could shift users to competitors. A major safety incident could trigger regulation. A major legal defeat could change training economics. A major infrastructure constraint could slow product development. A major leadership conflict could worry enterprises. A major opens or sleep could pressure prices. A major Google or Anthropic release could reduce nodal advantage. OpenAI's lead is not invincible. In AI, the gap can change quickly. That is why the company keeps moving so aggressively. Speed is defense. Now let us talk about why OpenAI's story matters for capitalism itself. AI is a technology that may reduce the cost of cognitive labor. If that happens, the returns may flow too. Workers who use AI well, companies that deploy AI well, cloud providers, chip makers, model companies, data owners, platform owners, consumers who gain cheaper services. But the distribution is uncertain. OpenAI sits near the top of that value chain. It could capture a significant share of the new value created by AI. This is why its structure and mission matter. If a company captures enormous value from a technology that affects everyone, people will ask how the benefits are shared. OpenAI's founding mission anticipated this. The challenge is living up to it when real money is involved. Now let us talk about the final big question. Is OpenAI building a product, a platform, or a new kind of intelligence utility? A product is something users buy. A platform is something others build on. A utility is something society depends on. OpenAI is becoming all three. ChatGPT is a product. The API is a platform. AI assistance may become a utility. The more it moves toward utility, the more accountability it will face. Electricity companies are regulated. Telecom networks are regulated. Banks are regulated. Healthcare systems are regulated. Search and social platforms, AI utilities will not escape scrutiny. OpenAI's future may involve a level of oversight that most startups never experience. That is another sign of power. Now let us return to the human level. Imagine someone in RDL hearing about nonprofit I'll add with $1 billion in pledged support. They might think, interesting but far away. Imagine that same person in RDRR using ChatGPT for the first time. They might think, this is useful but weird. Imagine them in Ardu seeing AI in their workplace, school phone, government policy, investment markets, and public debate. They might think, this is everywhere now. That is the OpenAI arc. Far away, useful, everywhere. Very few startups travel that path so quickly. Now let us close with the deeper lesson. OpenAI became powerful because it found the bridge between research and mass adoption. Many labs can produce papers. Many companies can build apps. Few can turn a frontier research capability into a daily habit for the world. OpenAI did that. It took the invisible work of AI research and made it visible. It took a model and made it conversational. It took a chatbot and made it a platform. It took a startup and made it a strategic institution. It took a mission and put it under the pressure of history. That is why the story matters. Not because OpenAI is guaranteed to win. Not because every decision it made was right. Not because every criticism is wrong. Not because the hype is always justified. It matters because OpenAI showed what happens when artificial intelligence becomes a product people can touch. The rest of the decade will be shaped by that moment. The company may rise higher. It may face harder limits. It may change structure again. It may become public. It may face new rivals. It may build agents that transform work. It may hit technical walls. It may help create enormous value. It may trigger deeper conflict. But whatever happens next, the turning point has already happened. OpenAI made AI feel real to the world. And once a technology feels real, the world starts rebuilding around it. That is how a startup becomes powerful. Not by asking permission. Not by winning every argument. Not by being perfect. By changing what everyone else believes is possible. OpenAI did that. The company that began as a nonprofit warning about concentrated AI power became the startup that concentrated the world's attention on AI. It gave the public a simple box and a conversation. Inside that box was a new kind of product. Behind that product was a giant machine of compute, capital, talent, and ambition. Around that machine grew an ecosystem of companies, governments, investors, workers, creators, and critics. That is the OpenAI story. A mission became a lab became a company became a platform became a power center. And now the whole world is trying to figure out what that power should be used